All right, so the temple dedication has been completed, and that temple dedication festival took place between January 12th and January 26th, and it's based on the extended dedication festival carried out by Solomon for the first temple, and that's described in 1 Kings chapter 8 and 2 Chronicles chapter 7. It says in chapter 7, verse 10, that he kept the dedication of the altar for 7 days and then the feast for 7 days. So that's what we have here is our dedication of the altar for 7 days, aka Hanukkah, because Hanukkah means dedication. And then the feast was Feast of Tabernacles, aka Sukkot, for 7 days. And then on the day after is the great 8th day. They held a solemn assembly. And then on the quote-unquote 9th day, they were sent away to their tents by the king. And I think some people were confused by when we were saying here that it's the 23rd day of the 7th month. It's not actually the 23rd day of the 7th month here. It's actually Tevet 9, according to this Enochian solar calendar that we're using. But we were just trying to figure out when they were being sent away, whether it was on the 8th day or the 9th day of Sukkot. And we were using the verbiage that it says there in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 10, where it says they were sent away on the 23rd day of the 7th month. We were trying to use that to figure out what day they were actually sent away, whether it was the 8th or the 9th. And so, we that enabled us to determine that it was actually the 9th. So we were looking at, because the 23rd day of the 7th month was when it was actually celebrated at that time when Solomon was dedicating the temple. And that's the Levitically defined dates for Sukkot, defined in Leviticus 23. And by using that and mapping those official Sukkot dates onto our dates, we're able to determine whether they were sent away on the 8th or the 9th. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, that was the completion of the dedication of the temple, and that temple is referring to us. And so we have now been dedicated, and this means that we actually can be raptured now, because I think that prior to this dedication process, we couldn't have been raptured. This needed to happen first. So, like I said, that got started on Kislev 25 on this Enochian solar calendar. And if you don't know what this Enochian solar calendar, what these dates that I'm using are, what they mean and what they are, I would suggest going to my channel excuse me, and watching this video here titled Happy Hanukkah, and then the next one after it titled Happy Sukkot, where I go into the calendar that we're using. And long story short, we found a great video by Brother. He runs a channel called Tabernacle of the Bridegroom, where he explains how the pre-Exodus calendar worked, like how the month and day counts worked. And that worked out to a date for Kislev 24 landing on January 11th. And then we started finding all this other evidence that was actually Kislev 24, like supporting evidence, one of which is actually written here on the spreadsheet, how it was, if you recall, it was the center point of all these eclipses, blood moon and solar eclipses. And so, for instance, from the last blood moon to this point, to this day, January 11th, it was 429 days, and then it's 429 days to the next blood moon. So it's like that center point. And 429 is 924 reversed. So that was a hint from God, because 924 is 24th day of the 9th month. So using that, and like I said, there's a few other hints. I definitely suggest watching those videos if you want to see all the supporting evidence. We determined that January 11th was actually Kislev 24. That means that the next day would be the beginning of Hanukkah, which would be the beginning of like the dedication. And the dedication in this case, like we said, mapping it to the extended dedication festival held by Solomon. So that is that part. I just wanted to mention that real fast. So that part's done. We as a temple have now been dedicated. We can be raptured. So the other thing that's new is, and really exciting, is now I added to the spreadsheet this like Acts 27:28 ship voyage narrative in parallel to the events of the temple dedication, and it all starts. So this ship voyage narrative comes from Acts 27 and 27 and 28. And if you guys have been watching my channel, whoever's been watching my channel should know that those two chapters define a celestial sign that occurred on December 27th going into the 28th. We're calling it the 276 sign because it's that 276 is referring to some the degrees of ecliptic longitude that the sun was at when it occurred. Now, if you want to get a really brief explanation, if you don't know what the 276 sign is, definitely essential viewing. Watch the Happy Hanukkah video. Like if you just want to get a brief introduction to that sign, watch the first 15 minutes where I go into like what it was and what it means, how it's significant. It was basically a celestial sign that occurred on those dates, and it signals that's like the exit sign. Okay, that means that the rapture is like the events are beginning, right? So from that point, everything starts. So from that point is like a beginning of a defined period of tarry prior to the actual rapture happening. Okay, and that happened right at the end of 2023 between Christmas and New Year's. You can also watch the other ones here that are actually titled 276 sign, like 276 sign short version, and the one prior to that, which is the long version. If you want to learn more about that sign, it's really interesting stuff. So that sign occurred, like I said, here on December 27th going into the 28th. And like I also said, it begins a period of tarry, okay? So we were trying to, when we first discovered that sign, we were trying to follow the narrative of like the voyage where it mentions they traveled from here to here and they tarried here for some number of days. And we're trying to apply that to determine like when the rapture would actually happen based on that. Because we figured that the rapture in that narrative, like the narrative element that would correspond to the actual rapture, would be either when they arrived at the town of Rhegium, because Rhegium means rupture, which kind of sounds like rapture, or that the narrative element that corresponds to the rapture would be when they left Rhegium and sailed with the south wind and they went through this narrow gap between Sicily and Italy. I can pull that up real fast. Let's see. Sicily map. I guess this will work. Okay, so yeah, Rhegium. I guess the modern name for it is Reggio. Okay, here we go. I guess that's Reggio, Calabria. So the last part of the Acts ship voyage narrative, they're at Reggio, and then they leave and they go with the south wind through this narrow gap here. And so we think that we now prefer the interpretation that the traveling through that narrow gap is analogous to traveling into heaven, right? Through the gate of heaven, through the gates of heaven. And using this interpretation, so like I said, from the 276 sign on December 27th, pretty much middle of the night, then there's this period of tarry, 14 plus 14 days, or 28 days of tarry. And we get that from, if you look in Acts 27, and you look at, I think it was 27 verse 27, and then also verse 33. The number 14 is mentioned here, and then in verse 33, it's mentioned again, 14. And actually, in verse 33, it explicitly mentions it in the context of tarrying. This day is the 14th day you have tarried. Okay, so what's significant here is that 14 is conspicuously mentioned twice in Acts 27. So we took this to mean that it's a hint that it's a 28 days of tarry. So if you go 28 days, so if this is the first day here, this is the day after that sort of overnight celestial sign. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Okay, so 28 days later is January 24th, or Tevet 6 on this Enochian solar calendar date. And it's also significant because if you go to Stellarium, now I guess I'll just show you real fast. So this was actually the sign. I know I showed this on previous videos and in community posts, but the sun was at 276 degrees in the ninth constellation Sagittarius, and the moon was at 108 degrees in the third constellation Gemini, and Jupiter was in the first constellation Aries at 35 degrees. Okay, this is what it looks like. And then in the actual stars, it looks like this. Okay, so this is Sagittarius. You have the sun here at 276 degrees, moon at 108 degrees in Gemini, and then Jupiter over here in the first constellation Aries. And so as you can see, the moon was at this, when the sign first manifested, the moon was in Gemini. It was a full moon, symbolizing the fullness of the Gentiles. Now, 28 days later, after this period of Terry, okay, getting to, what was it, the 24th of January, the moon in those 28 days goes all the way around the ecliptic, and exactly on that day, it's right back there in Gemini, okay, as a full moon. I guess it's the wolf full moon. Yeah, so that was I guess I'll just show it here. 27th, okay, in the late evening, there's the moon, okay, with the little reticule. Now if you just go forward day by day, following this red reticule, going around the ecliptic, which is this orange line. Okay, so here we are, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Yeah, it's pretty much back there. It's just maybe you got to go back a couple hours, but it's on the 24th, I guess in the morning, it's back here in Gemini. Okay, and of course that is referred to in the actual text of Acts 28 as Castor and Pollux. I guess because these two twins are called Castor and Pollux in the ancient world, and also the two stars there above at the top at the heads of Gemini are called Castor and Pollux. So after the 28 days of Terry, we land right back. The moon is right back in its initial position in Gemini, and we took this to mean that we're sort of in the narrative, we're at, so to speak, we're at Acts 28 verse 11 again, because remember Acts 28 verse 11 is where it mentions Castor and Pollux. So that being said, we figured, okay, well, if we're at Acts 28:11, let's look at that real fast. Acts 28:11, that's where it mentions Castor and Pollux, and after 3 months, let me pull this over so you can see it. I hope this is legible for you guys. Most of my videos, by the way, you have to look usually on a desktop, because on a cell phone screen, it's just going to be too hard to see all the stuff I'm showing. So at Acts 28 verse 11 it says, "And after 3 months we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the isle, whose sign was Castor and Pollux." So yeah, so that's why we figured at that point we can sort of resume the narrative. Okay, so because in Acts 27 towards the end is when you have like the ship running aground, and then at the beginning of Acts 28 there, for the first 10 verses there, that represents this 3 months where they're wintering on this island of Malta. This doesn't, of course, correspond to 3 months in the reality timeline, right? Because obviously that was not 3 months ago. Let's see here. There we are. Okay. So yeah. So after the 28 days, that's a nice hint here how it says 28, also Acts 28. After 28 days, we're back here at where the moon is in Gemini, or where the moon is in Castor and Pollux, Acts 28:11. And right after that verse, it says, "And landing at Syracuse, we tarried there 3 days." Okay. So that means that the next day, after the 24th, where the moon is in Gemini, we're going to apply those 3 days of tarrying at Syracuse. So January 25th would be the first day of tarrying at Syracuse, and January 26th would be the second day, and January 27th would be the third day. I also believe that this was the true day of Tu B'Shevat, for various reasons that I can't really get into right now. But I'll just say that if you look on Torah calendar, they have Tu B'Shavat on January 27th. So if that was those were the 3 days of tearing at Syracuse, that's the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th of January. Well, check this out. We got this really good confirmation. It came from Brother G44. Like I said, that's the 27th of January. And look what happened. Look what takes place on the 27th of January. There is a minor Jewish feast called Purim Saragossa that starts on 18th of Shevat, which begins sunset on the 27th. And Saragossa means Syracuse. So you can see right here, it's an medieval Catalan exonym for Syracuse. So wow, that really blew me away. You have in the Acts narrative, we're at this tarry period in Syracuse, and actually that's the last day of the tarry. And on that exact day, you have this minor Jewish feast that's called Purim. Well, we'll just say Purim Syracuse. Saragossa means Syracuse. So that was a great hint that gave us confidence that we are interpreting this correctly, that we're on the right track. So really from that point on, we just are trying to figure out, well, what's the next what's the correct interpretation of the next part of this trip? Because we tarry at Syracuse, for 3 days, and then the next verse is Acts 28, verse 13. And from thence we fetched a compass and came to Rhegium. And after 1 day the south wind blew, and we came the next day to Puteoli. So the way I'm applying this narrative is that, so this is the third day of tarrying at Syracuse. That's the 27th of January. And then the next day they sail to Rhegium. And that's not that far. So, they would get there, even if they left in the morning, they'd probably get there in the afternoon or something. And then it says, and after 1 day the south wind blew. So I'm interpreting that to mean that they tarry 1 day in Rhegium. So that would be the 29th of January. And then the next day, since that south wind is blowing, they sail with the south wind. And I have that here. On January 30th, or Tevet 12, they sail with the south wind through that gap that I was describing. So let's go back to that real fast. So you've got this area, Rhegium, and then where they tarry for 1 day, and then that next morning they notice the south wind blowing, and they go ahead and sail. And so that day where they're sailing through that gap, to me, represents the rapture. Like, that's going to be the timing of the rapture. And that's the 30th of January, which maybe that means that it would be like the 30th of January in like the Americas in the West, and then the 31st of January in Asia and Australia. I'm not 100% sure, but that's where we are now. I think this is really, really exciting. I think we're on track with the correct interpretation of this voyage. I also got a lot of hints about the number 113 from God lately. So on my phone, let me pull it up here real fast. On the morning of the 26th, I got I actually had been seeing a lot of like 113s in a lot of my number research, 113s or 131 or 311. And then on the morning of the 26th, I got the verse of the day on my phone, which was 1 Corinthians 1:30. So that's like a 113. And that made me kind of suspicious in light of, like I said, all the 13s and 31s and 113s that have been popping up in my numbers research over the last week or so. And then just this morning on my cell phone, I got another verse of the day, which was Hebrews 3:13. So more 13s and 31s. So that's kind of like a second witness that shows that these are genuine hints from God. So the question is, what do these numbers correspond to? What do they mean? Well, one thing is that the verse in Acts 28, which I argue corresponds to the actual rapture, is verse 13, because that's the verse where Paul sails with the south wind through that Sicilian gap, which I say corresponds to the gate of heaven. And then if you look at the actual date, January 31st, written European style, is 3-1.1, so that's like a 113. And then on our Enochian solar calendar, it's Tevet 13, which is 10th month, 13th day, 113. On the official Jewish calendar, it's Shevat 21, that's 11th month, 21st day. 21 reduces to 3, so it's a 113. So, and then if you look at Stellarium on January 31st, the sun is in Capricorn, and it just happens to be at 311 degrees of ecliptic longitude. So on that particular day, which is projecting the number 113 on all of our calendars that we're using, the Gentile calendar, the official Jewish calendar, and then this, what we believe is the correct calendar that God's using, this number 113 is being projected, and it just happens to be on a day where the sun is at 311 degrees of ecliptic longitude. And then we know also that they declared the pandemic on 3/11, didn't they, back in 2020? So maybe that has something to do with it as well. And then if you look at the gematria, because we're in this like wolf moon period, right? Wolf full moon. And if you look at the gematria of wolf moon, it comes out to, a really strong profile with these 13s and 31s. You got ordinal is 113, reduction is 41, which is the 13th prime number. Reverse is 103, which is a 13, and then you got reverse reduction, which is a 31. So that was pretty interesting. And another thing I noticed was in Acts 28, verse 13 again. That's where it talks about sailing with the south wind through that gap, and that word for south wind is Strong's Greek 3558. And if you look that up online, so that word is notos. It's got 7 occurrences in the Bible, and it's not like really a huge thing, but I just noticed that once again, like 13 or 31 seems to pop up suspiciously frequently in the chapter verse numbers. So like it's in Luke 11:31, it's in Luke 13:29, it's in Acts 27:13, Acts 28:13, Revelation 21:13, and even in the 2 verses where it doesn't have a 13, it's like in both cases it's chapter 12, so it's like 1 + 2 equals 3. It's not a huge thing, but it's something that I thought was noteworthy, especially given that wolf moon gematria has so much representation of those numbers, 13 or 31 or 113 or whatever. Another thing I found, which is actually very cool, looking at that area on a map, so Regium, like I had mentioned earlier, is Reggio is the modern name of that town. So they departed from Regium, and then with the south wind, they sailed north through this gap, which I had mentioned earlier, I think corresponds to the gate to heaven. And I zoomed in on this area here, and there's this place name called Torre Faro, okay? And I looked it up on Wikipedia. I guess it means like lighthouse point or something. But I clicked on the coordinates, and let it take me to Google Maps, and the coordinates are very interesting. First of all, it's 38 degrees and 15 minutes by north by 15 degrees and 38 minutes east. So it's this weird mirror thing going on, and in both cases it's 33 seconds. So it's this weird mirror thing, and I think that's, I don't know a lot about coordinates, but that seems to me pretty unlikely and noteworthy. And what's really amazing is in both of these coordinates, you've got 153. So you got 153 there on the north coordinates, and then you got 153 on the east coordinates. So again, the north coordinates are 38 degrees, 15 minutes and 33 seconds north, and then the east ones are 15 degrees, 38 minutes and 33 degrees east. You've got in both of those 153 and 153. Of course, referring to the 153 catch of large fish from John 21:11. So yeah, wow, that is amazing. So yeah, we'll see, guys. I mean, there are no guarantees, but this is looking really, really promising at this point. We've got this temple dedication complete. The temple, of course, being us, which means that we actually can be raptured. And then this very, very compelling interpretation of the Acts 27 to 28 ship voyage seems to be on track perfectly. The hint about the third day tarry at Syracuse happening to fall on the exact day of this minor feast day called Purim Zaragoza, which means Syracuse, was just really huge. I mean, that was so encouraging and let us know that we're mapping these dates correctly. And yeah, then at that point, it's just a question of what is the correct application of Acts 27 verse 13, you know, the ship narrative there, or the travel narrative, to our calendar. And I mean, I'm just applying the most straightforward reading of that verse. In, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I have. I have takes, you know, that just half a day to sail at Regium, and then the next day is a day of tarry there, and then the next day the south wind is blowing, so they take the ship through that gap, and that corresponds to the rapture. So yeah, that's where we are, guys. This information's pretty exciting for me, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are excited as I am. It really does. I mean, there are no guarantees, but it really does seem like this could be happening here in a couple days. So get ready. And if you want to share this with your friends and family, please do so. And if you have any questions or comments, drop them down in the comment section. And yeah, thanks for watching the video. God bless.